Welcome everyone to Monday Match Analysis. I'm Gill Gross, and boy, oh boy, we're gonna have a new face on the Monday Match Analysis thumbnail this week. You already know it's Fabio Fognini, age 32, wins his first Masters 1000 title, winning Monte Carlo and beating the man who's won it 11 times, Rafael Nadal, in the semifinals. On this week's Monday Match Analysis, I'm going to get into mostly that match, less so the Dusan Lajovic final, but that was almost just as impressive because we know that Fognini is going to be able to really get excited for Nadal and take on an underdog role, which he's very dangerous in that role. Against Lajovic, he's expected to win. It's the final of a Masters event, which, that's a place he hasn't ever been in. So to have that expectation, that pressure, and to come through and deliver a great performance is almost just as impressive. But we're going to get into the Nadal match a bit tactically, and then French Open power rankings, and then I get to your comments. This is going to be a lot of fun. First, before I get into my video clips, some general words on Fognini. I mean, this is a dude who is as talented as anyone. He's got big four talent when it comes to ball striking, racket skills. And I say that with Nick Kyrgios as well. Again, the big four, I'm going to include Andy Murray in this. They are elite at multiple things that don't go together. And if you just look at the big three in tennis, I would say racket skills, physicality, and mental. Fognini is elite with the racket skills. He's not elite physically, he's not elite mentally, and that's why he's been inconsistent throughout his career. Sometimes his racket skills have been able to really take over matches, and throughout this week, that happened fairly consistently. Now, the clay helps his physicality a lot because he's a much better lateral mover on clay, and he has a lot more time to get to his spots. He becomes much more likely to to play well on the run, and that extra time, it gives him what he needs, again, to get in the right spot when he's moving laterally on the court, and I find that he's much better when he's on the run on the clay. It's his favorite surface, despite being an offensive player. Isn't that strange? Most offensive players would prefer faster surfaces, but Fognini, who's an offensive player, because he's so much better at moving laterally on the clay, it's his best surface. And because when the ball slows down, again, the best ball strikers can really take advantage of that extra time. Anyway, Fognini is elite in that area, as good as anyone. Federer-esque ball striking a lot of the times. And that's the reality of it. So we've seen that throughout his career. Always been one of the more fun guys to watch. But the inconsistencies have been sort of puzzling. I mean, sometimes he can't get the ball on the court. He can't even make a ball. And he's sometimes looks slow, lacks explosiveness. Sometimes he lacks a lot of focus. And that's a big thing. Sometimes he's just not focused. This week, consistent. After the Australian Open, he was 1-7 in his next 8 matches. After the Australian Open, 1-7, really struggling, coming into Monte Carlo. So he's completely turned it around. Do I project consistency? I don't know. But he's had his moment in the sun here. 32 years old, up to a career-high ranking, number 12. Let's take a look at what he had, some of the goods that he needed to beat Nadal. Here's something we've talked about, the strong righty backhand, and this is the best against Nadal. It's really the best attribute you can have. If you're comfortable, if you have a really strong backhand, and you're a righty, and you can take that backhand on the rise and be aggressive with it and step into the court, a la Novak Djokovic, 2017 Roger Federer. Which next-gen player has given Nadal the most trouble? Karen Khachanov. That's his bread and butter. That's his best shot, when he can step into that backhand. A strong righty backhand will be the best thing you can possibly have against Rafa Nadal, because look at how he defends here. He's pushed into the corner, high loopy cross-court forehand, and Fognini's able to take this on the rise and rip the backhand down the line. if you look at Nadal's shot here, I think that this is a good neutralizing shot. I think that, again, I think most righties can't attack this. It's deep, cross court, tons of topspin, and it's going to jump off the court. Fognini's not only going to take it on the rise, but change direction and hit it perfectly and hit it with a ton of pace and place it perfectly. The backhand down the line, the backhands down the line for Fognini all week long were so overwhelmingly good, it was mind-blowing. Against Zverev, against Coric. Now, the interesting thing is about Zverev and Coric is that both of those players, the best thing you can do is stretch them out to their forehand. Zverev and Coric. So Fognini's backhand down the line was money in those matches, so you know he's going to get through those matches. And then against Nadal, again, when Nadal defends, it's generally it's high. You know, he gets a lot of net clearance and a lot of topspin. Your only choice is to take this ball on the rise. Otherwise, you're in huge trouble. But most players, when they take it on the rise, it's too hard to change direction down the line when the ball's jumping off the court. That's hard to time. So normally you have to go cross court. And if Fognini went back cross court, well, Nadal would have been back in the point. Let's play this one more time. Most righties, they have to go cross court on this. They can't go down the line. And you see Nadal wasn't really fully recovered to the middle. If Fognini went cross court, Nadal's back in the point. And guess what? Nadal gets a forehand. Now he's turned the point around. So against most players, that neutralizing forehand by Nadal when he was pulled into the corner, again, it would have gotten Nadal back in the point. Fognini, on the rise, backhand down the line. Short, compact swing and gets so much pace on that backhand. He's only 5'10", right? He's not that big. This is just defying the rules of ball striking, which is what Fognini does all the time. I want to point out another thing that he does unbelievably well. He knows exactly when to go behind his opponent. He's so good at hitting behind his opponent. And it's a certain sense he has. And a certain play that I saw all week from Fognini was combining the taking away of time and going behind his opponent. So watch him do it to Rafa here. Nadal goes inside in, and you see Rafa's wrong-footed. And here's why. When Nadal hits this inside-in forehand, he sees that Fognini's last shot, he hit it from pretty deep in the court. I'm going to pause it. I'm going to go back, pause it right here. Fognini's pretty far back in the court. When Nadal tracks this ball coming in and takes it down the line, he is basically calculating that the amount of time, he's not thinking about this. This is just comes natural. He's predicting the amount of time he has to recover to the middle of the court. And what you do is you pick a spot after you hit the ball. This is the spot I want to recover to. And Nadal picked that spot, but Fognini moved in explosively. He took explosive steps inside the court and took it way earlier than Nadal was expecting. Nadal wasn't in his spot yet there. Therefore, Nadal hadn't recovered as far as he thought he could. And then when Fognini struck the ball, all of Nadal's momentum was still going to his left, towards his recovery. And Fognini recognizes when that happens and goes behind his opponent. And all of the momentum for Nadal was going the wrong direction because he was still recovering. Because when he hit that forehand, he thought he had more time to recover than he did. I'm going to play this 2 times. Nadal's recovering, and look how Fognini moved in and took this earlier than Nadal was expecting. And when he took it earlier than Nadal was expecting, that gave him the ability to wrong foot Nadal. And Fognini did this to so many opponents. I saw this so many times. Now, Nadal didn't have his game. Nadal called it one of the worst matches on clay that he's played in, I think, what did he say, 13 years or 14 years. Rafa was off, and there's no way around that. And I want to just show one of the points where this was extremely apparent. and this is in the second set, and this is Fognini beating Nadal for pace on a clay court, which is just very rare to see. If you look at these backhands cross court from Fognini, all they really have going for them is the pace. He hits them hard, but he doesn't get good width on them. He doesn't get good depth on them. But both forehands that Nadal hits back, one was short in the court. The second was an error long past the baseline. And I'm very descriptive for those who like to listen to the podcast version of this. On both forehands, Nadal looked uncomfortable with the pace that Fognini was putting on the ball. And it's something that you'll see from time to time on a grass court or a fast hard court, but Nadal should never get beaten for pace on a clay court. That should be very rare. His pace absorption should be fine. So when you see a point like this, which I saw multiple times from Nadal, where he's uncomfortable with Fognini's pace, that's a red flag. That means he's not feeling the ball. And Nadal's the rhythm with his feet were off. He was mistiming shots, but again, he had no feel and was way off his game. One of the reasons for it, and one of the things he said was, "Look, like I'm not staying on the court with enough consistency," and that's certainly been true. I mean, Nadal has had no rhythm over the past, really, 18 months. He hasn't really sustained a very long period of time where he's consistently healthy and playing matches. So this was his first tournament back. He runs into a tough opponent in Fabio Fognini, someone who's had already beaten him 2 times. One of them at the U.S. Open, or someone commented that Fognini's now beaten him 3 times on clay, but when I looked at the stat, it said that Fognini had beaten him 3 times in total, and I know that Fognini beat him at the U.S. Open, coming down from 2 sets to love down. So I don't know if that someone put a YouTube comment that was wrong, or if my stat was wrong. Who knows? But it's one or the other. Fognini has beaten Nadal in the past, and it's a very dangerous opponent for Nadal. It's a strong righty backhand, and Rafa in his first tournament back could have certainly won it, playing at the level that he played. If he didn't run into Fognini, he could have won this tournament. But he wasn't at his best, and I guess that's certainly understandable coming back. Now, I mean, he's been so good coming back from injury that I wouldn't have been surprised at all if he just had a really overall solid week and never blinked. Because really, he looked quite good until this match. And there were times against Pela where his forehand was off, but overall, he looked pretty good this week. The forehand, before we go on to the French Open Power Rankings, the forehand is actually something I want to talk about, because that's the shot that is really paramount for Nadal now in his older age. And I know I'm getting some comments a little bit later that talk about Nadal's defense, because I read through the comments, so I'll save some of this for that. But Nadal didn't have the range on his forehand against Fabio Fognini. And here's the difference between current Nadal and prime Nadal. Prime Nadal could have not had his forehand and maybe still won. Current Nadal has no chance if he doesn't have the range on his forehand. If that forehand isn't firing like the best weapon in tennis, and on a clay court, I think it's the best weapon in tennis. That's my opinion. Del Potro's forehand is a little bit flatter, so not quite as good on clay. So and also I always exclude the serves. Forget like Isner's serve and Karlovic's serve. I don't count those, but I think that Nadal's forehand is the biggest weapon in men's tennis on clay. When it's not at that level, Nadal has no chance, because his ability to grind out victories through defense and consistency and cardio, conditioning, and shot tolerance, those days are over. Nadal was having tons of trouble with his forehand. Fognini was playing way too well, and he had no chance. I know I keep saying last point, but I want to just circle back to Fabio Fognini really quick before the French Open Power Rankings. Fognini's so loose, and you can't teach that. Because I know that I've talked about his racket talent, and I just say, well, it is because it is. But I want to go a little bit deeper for you guys, and I want to explore kind of some of the things that he does do. And I love his technique, but throwing that aside, how loose his arm is, his wrist is, his grip is, and how fluent he is something that's so hard to replicate. And not only is that technical, not only does he have very loose technique, he's able to be in high pressure situations in match play, and he's able to play so loose, so relaxed. Just look at even his face. Look how relaxed his face is when he hits the ball. You can't teach that. Everyone's best shots come in practice when they're not feeling any pressure in their joints, when they're completely loose. That's when most players will hit their most magical, incredible shots. And Fognini can almost replicate this practice-like looseness, the same thing that Kyrgios can replicate, and the same thing that sometimes Federer is able to do when he's high-flying Federer. Those are three guys who are able to play looser than the rest. The best thing you can possibly do, or the first piece of advice that I can give you on YouTube without looking even at your serve, if you're a player at home and you want to add miles per hour on your serve, the first thing I can tell you to do, again, don't think that you're going to do this and your serve's going to be amazing, but grip the racket looser. There's no better way to add miles per hour on your serve. Grip the racket looser. Fognini embodies that. The fact that the looser, the more flowy you are with your joints. Same thing for throwing a punch in boxing. Same thing for swinging a baseball bat. The more loose you can keep your joints when you're going through any kind of technique, the more power and acceleration you can create. But very hard to teach that, how loose Fognini stays. But it's almost like he's in practice. Again, it's so hard. It's so hard to for anyone to possibly play like that. But he's a magician, right? So Nadal doesn't play like that. Djokovic doesn't play like that. What are they? They're like machines. They're like robots, right? They are mechanics. They can replicate the same thing over and over again perfectly. Fognini is a completely different style. He doesn't have this kind of very much more stiff but beautiful at the same time. I mean, Nadal and Djokovic's technique is beautiful in its own right, but they're more like machines, and Fognini's more like a flowy magician. I don't know. Okay, French Open Power Rankings. I don't know if that last tangent made any sense. This was April 15th, last week, before Monte Carlo started. The parentheses are where the players were last week. So Nadal was number 1. He moved up from number 2. Djokovic was number 2. Thiem at 3. Federer at 4. Tsitsipas moved up from 7 to 5. Wawrinka entered the rankings. Felix Auger-Aliassime entered the rankings. Zverev moved up from 8 to 9. Schwartzman moved up from 10 to 9. And Kyle Edmund stayed put at number 10. This week, a couple of changes, especially after, well, in the top 4, nothing changes. So Nadal's still at number 1, then Djokovic, Thiem, then Federer. Zverev moves up from number 8 to number 5. And look, after number 4, after the top 4, I don't know how else to put it. It's a bit of a crapshoot. I don't really think anyone after number 4 right now would have a chance at winning the French Open. No one has really shown enough. And there's a lot of inconsistency. A lot of the players in the 5 through 10 range in last week's French Open power rankings were very disappointing in Monte Carlo. So Zverev moves to number 8. Wawrinka stays put at number 6, despite... Who did he lose to? Oh, I think he lost to Cecchinato. Fabio Fognini is entering the rankings, and he's coming in at number 7. Again, let's see if he's consistent. But, I wouldn't be that surprised if by the time the French Open rolls around, Fognini's back outside this top 10. At the same time, we know how much he likes clay. We know how dangerous he is. But there's a reason that Fabio Fognini's 32 and is just now, again, he's never done this well in his career. So right now it's an outlier. Hopefully he builds on this. Marco Cecchinato enters back into the rankings. I know he was in the rankings at some point, but he fell off. Now he's back in at number 8. He had a good week. And Daniil Medvedev, who went to the semifinals and beat Djokovic in this tournament. He enters the top 10, debuts at number 9. Tsitsipas, who was up at number 5, I mean, he hadn't done that much to deserve being at number 5, but he was your Australian Open semifinalist, and I'm from what I've gathered so far, or at least last year, Tsitsipas does love clay, but right now he hasn't done anything, or done enough at least, on the surface. So it's volatile, and he's down to number 10. He lost to Medvedev, so now he's one spot behind Medvedev. So Stefanos Tsitsipas is at number 10. Nadal and Djokovic, they're not moving. Again, neither of them are at their peak right now. I mean, it's really hard to say. It's extremely difficult right now to project the state of Nadal and Djokovic when it comes to Paris, because neither of them are ready right now to play Paris. Who's going to be more ready in about a month's time? That's what we'll be looking for. Let's go to the comments. We'll take this to about the 30-minute mark. I'm going to read these in order of most likes, and I'll just keep going down the list. So most likes to least likes. The first comment is analysis by Terry and Terry. I don't think there's a question in here. And again, I mean, he writes very long comments, so make sure, always insightful, to check out my post from last night and to read that. Second comment, was it just bad for Rafa, or is he vulnerable and this could happen again, is the question. Is Rafa vulnerable? Well, whenever someone's out of match play, they're going to be more likely to lose confidence on the court and to have an inconsistent showing. And that's what Rafa said after the match. It's completely true. When you're not developing rhythm in your schedule, you're much more likely to take the court, be like, oh my God, I can't feel the ball, I'm reacting late, my legs feel like bricks, which I don't know if his legs felt like bricks, but when things are off, you're much more likely to have an off day when you're not playing matches for a sustained period of time, or at least if you're not on a consistent schedule. And injuries completely disrupt that consistent schedule and that rhythm. In general, I don't know if Rafa's more vulnerable in general once he builds up that rhythm. Because, yeah, he's lost a lot of the defense that he once had, but it didn't stop him last year. Last year he was more offensive than normal on the clay, and he was dominant. So I think that Nadal can do that again. He just needs to build up some confidence, because right now, I think that all the time off has worn on his mind. And there have been way too many matches now where I feel like Nadal has lost the confidence, and that has manifested itself especially in Nadal kind of losing his ability to play aggressive with the forehand. Thank you for the comment from Amalia B. Papringo says, Papa Gringo. Are Rafa and Nole reaching that age where there's a big drop in performance? 32, 33 seems to hit every player hard. Sampras, Agassi, Fed's 5-year major title drought began around that age. Even second-tier players like Ferrer, Berdych, Sanga seem to hit a wall at that time. Thoughts? My thoughts are it really depends on the player. So, for example, I think that you're not remembering correctly with Ferrer because Ferrer's best year of his career was when he was 32. Take a look at John Isner. Best year of his career last year. I think he was like 32. Maybe he turned 33 in the middle of the year. So sometimes it's the other way. The guy who just won Monte Carlo, Fabio Fognini, career high ranking, 32. So it really depends on the player. Nadal, you worry about because of his injuries. You simply do. I mean, Nadal doesn't have that many years left. He will not play as long as Roger Federer. If he does, I will be really, really happy to be wrong. But it seems entirely unlikely that for a guy who really has suffered such a consistent regimen of injuries will be able to play to his late 30s. Djokovic physically seems pretty good. It's really the more mental with him. Is he gonna stay? Is he gonna be able to stay motivated through his 30s? Which is an interesting thing. For that to be a problem is interesting, but I think that maybe is paramount for Djokovic. But then also, who knows? Maybe he could hit a wall physically. It's really hard to predict this, and I hate predicting it. There's nothing I hate more than trying to predict longevity. It's unpredictable. What can you say? The players who can rely more on their shot making and less on their physicality, they're in better shape generally, and the smaller players are in better shape generally. But again, generalizations, exceptions to the rule. Max Dang Vu. Hi Gil, do you think Nadal and Djokovic are saving themselves for the French Open? No, I don't think so. Um, Once you're on the court, you're competing 100%, hopefully. Maybe you don't prepare as hard. Maybe you're not you have a you plan your preparation so that you physically peak for the French Open. So, if I'm Djokovic's fitness coach, I'm going to gradually increase the amount of training that we're doing off the court. And I want his cardio and his strength to peak about a week before the French Open, which means we're going to do the hardest training about, well, again, I want it to peak for the beginning of that fortnight. So that's certainly true. And they're going to be planning their off time and their relaxation time as far away from the French Open as possible. But saving themselves, I don't know about that. Who do you see performing better in Madrid? Nadal right now. I think Djokovic is a little bit further off his form than Nadal is. And they're both off their form. But Djokovic is further. On that note, why are the courts in Madrid and Rome faster than Monte Carlo or Paris? I'm not an expert on that. I know people who are. I could always ask these people, but I'm not well versed in exactly what the differences in the material are of the clay court. But essentially, I know more about hard courts actually than clay courts. I'm pretty clueless about clay courts. But for example, like a hard court, the more you sand the court, the slower it'll get, and the more receptive it'll be to spin. And the more you smooth out the court, the faster it'll get, right? So how rough is the court? Think about concrete. Smooth concrete, rough concrete, if you rubbed your hand against it. There's an example. For clay, again, I'm just not an expert on that. Um, Last one. Lancelot Chua. Is it about how Nadal has lost his defense? He only seemed to be able to be aggressive, and if the opponent is more aggressive than him, he seems to have trouble going back to his defense mode. He does have trouble going back to his defense mode right now. And Nadal, mental state-wise, looked quite similar in the matches he lost to Fed in Shanghai, Novak at Australian Open, and probably the matches he won in last year's US Open. Thoughts? Again, Nadal, his psyche, I would classify it right now as fragile. What he can do to remedy that is get in a rhythm, stay healthy for a while, which he normally does on clay, and the results will come. I mean, Rafa will get to where he needs to be in time for Roland Garros, and I think Djokovic will as well. Barcelona is awesome. Great draw. It's a 500 event, but clearly they're paying the players well. They're treating the players well because it's an awesome draw. So hope you enjoyed this. Enjoy the tennis in Barca. Until then, hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.